Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual roundtable session. Here presenting today, we have Andy Watts and Bruce Knight, and they are our cloud specialists here at Bytes. I really do want you to get the most out of the session, so we really would like to encourage you to ask questions throughout, and when we can answer them as best as possible. This can be, a little bit more of an interactive session as opposed to our usual kind of webinar formats. And there will be some polls as well that will be popping up throughout the session, which I'd encourage you to fill out so that we can tailor the session as much as possible. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we sort of really get started. During the session, you will be muted, but there is a question box on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you do have any questions at any point, please just pop them in here and we can answer them. The session will be recorded and we can make that available to you after the session. And there will be a bit of a feedback form that will pop up at the end. So if you could fill that in, we'd much appreciate it because it will help us moving forward in our future sessions. So to get started, just before we kick off, I'd like to just pop up our first poll. I'm just going to pop it on the screen now. So if you could just answer the questions for me. You want to see it? Great, thank you. I'll just share this 1 second. So just sharing the answers there on the screen, just so we can get a bit of an idea on your current situation, your current IT environment. Now, before moving on, I'm just going to close it up, and then I'm going to hand you over to Andy and Bruce, who are going to kick things off. Thanks, guys.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bruce Knight. Thanks, Cassie, for the intro. And I guess, between Andy and myself today, what we really wanted to speak to you all about is just about shifting to a modern desktop. And, the premise for this whole discussion today, I guess, is you either have some operating systems potentially on Windows 7, and I saw the poll now that it's good to see a lot of people already started looking at Windows 10. So it's more around, let's see where you are today from an OS perspective. So Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, and why this shift to a modern desktop is important. Obviously, there's a couple of dates coming up soon, and we'll talk about those as well. So it's really about moving from a legacy OS, Windows 7, 8 to Windows 10, and then also from an Office perspective, getting out of that perpetual cycle of Office where things are kind of upgraded and updated every 3 years. So moving from older versions of perpetual Office to the new subscription versions of Windows and Office 365 ProPlus, so that you have that evergreen sort of version of Office and Windows on your desktop, easier to manage and update and to keep current with all the security updates. So we will go through a few slides today, but I guess, as the sort of webinar kind of suggests, it's a virtual roundtable. So we would like to get as much feedback as possible from all of you folk on the call today. So we'll go through a couple of slides, speak to you about some of the core concepts about moving to a modern workplace. I have Andy on the call as well. He's a technical whiz around what it takes to kind of move from that legacy platform to the newer platform. So he can help talk around some of the technical pieces. And I'll just kind of talk around some of the concepts about, what is the value of moving to a modern desktop. And then also, if you have any questions during the session or as part of the presentation, feel free to ask those questions and we can kind of, address those as and when. So we want to try and make this ad hoc. I know it's a little bit difficult being, in a virtual environment, but let's see how this goes. And we'll try and answer all questions as they come through. So let's kick off, I guess. I mean, the main reason most of us are on the call today is this end of service schedule that's coming up next year. and early next year as well. So as you can see, Windows 7, January 2020, and I think most organizations have already been thinking about Windows 7 and the end of dates or end of life in 2020. So that's end of support, and what that really means, I guess, is no more sort of security updates. So typically, a life cycle for Microsoft products is you have 5 years of support, and that includes feature updates and security updates, and then it goes into an extended support lifecycle where you just get those security patches and updates. And we're kind of in that already. And then at 2020, Microsoft are going to stop security updates as well. And you don't really want to be in that situation where something, I guess, if we have to think of something more recent like WannaCry or something like that came out, and because your operating system was not patched or up to date, you could be affected by another sort of malware attack or something similar to what we saw a couple of years back. And I guess these things are happening all the time. So it always is a good idea to keep current and to stay on top of your security patches and updates. But there's other benefits as well to moving to the latest versions of Windows and Office 365. And obviously the next one, Office 2010. So if you're on 2010, or some of you may even be on 2007 and earlier, Office 2010 end of support, October 2020. So also coming up next year. And then as part of that, when 2020 goes out of extended support, there'll be a couple of changes to the Office 365 sort of commercial services. And that's, I guess, if you have already started to move to Office 365, you've got some mailboxes in the service, and you're using Outlook 2010 to connect to that service, this could impact you in a few ways as well. So Microsoft may not be supporting it. Might still work, but if something goes wrong, you might not be in support. So just to be aware of that as well. If you do have Office 2010 or Outlook 2010, to start maybe thinking about upgrading to the newer subscription or ProPlus click-to-run versions of Office. So make sense? So really, I think, besides the fact that Windows 7, Office 2010 are becoming end of service or end of life soon, one of the big reasons that we want to shift to a modern workplace is to sort of change that culture of work within your organization. So I really see Windows 10 and Office 365 Pro Plus, so the latest versions of the tool sets, is that sort of ticket to the game, right? So if you want a modern workplace in your organization, it's that first sort of point of call for your new employees or your existing employees. They get their machine, and if you're on legacy versions, sometimes it's a little bit clunky for users to get up to speed, to get back into maybe Windows 7, where they've come from an organization that's using perhaps Windows 10 and the latest versions of Office, but also to be more collaborative with each other. So having the latest versions of Windows and Office certainly lends to that sort of experience, and allows you to then interact, I guess, with the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 services in the back end a lot better. So, it's all about shifting to that modern workplace, trying to change that culture of work within your organization, to be able to collaborate in real time, having that always on sort of access to files and data in your organization, and giving your users that flexibility to work from wherever and whenever. And then also, of course, behind all of that is to make sure you're staying safe and secure when your users are, having that new and modern experience in their organization. So I guess that's kind of the vision that you might see now on your screen is, you want to give that sort of vision or that experience to your users, to allow them the flexibility to be able to be creative, to collaborate on the go, and just have that experience, so that new people coming into your organization, they can get up and running and have a great experience, I guess, as that first sort of, touch point into your organization when they start working at your company. And of course, that modern workplace, in the back end, we're looking at shifting to that modern workplace, but using the services in Microsoft 365 to help you get there. So if you haven't heard of Microsoft 365 yet, it is the latest and greatest versions of Windows 10, Office 365, and of course, enterprise mobility and security. So that's those three components bundled together, and they come in either the E3 or the E5 format. And it always revolves around those four pillars you see on your screen. So The first two, having the creativity and teamwork, really about delivering that sort of creative and productive environment for your end users. And then the next two blocks you see on your screen, the simplicity and security. So that's, making sure that as you allow your users to be more flexible, that IT can sort of have that simplicity and security and make sure that those users are collaborating and communicating in a more safe and secure way. So I guess at the heart of this modern workplace that we've been talking about, the PC, right? So a lot of you and most people today use Windows PC. There might be some Macs out there, but you might not be on this call if we're talking about the Mac experience. So we have our mobile phones, and those are kind of always with us, and they're great for communicating, talking to people, maybe consuming some content, and also, a lot of users today have their tablets, also really good for consuming information, reading. But if you want to get stuff done, then we see that PC as a tool to help you get there, whether it's a Microsoft Surface or potentially one of the more modern devices out there. It's having Windows 10 on that most sort of modern experience through the latest and greatest versions of Dell, HP as well. So all those vendors out there, we're really talking about the technology that enables those devices to be the best tools to work with in your organization. I think, as we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, is that, users, they want that simplicity, the flexibility, and that mobility experience. And they want the latest and greatest and the best devices to do that on. But how do you, as IT, ensure that, if you're giving your users that simplicity and flexibility, that you sort of maintain that sort of manageability, the security and compliance components as well. So, it's about shifting to a more modern security sort of framework as well. So, gone are the days, I guess, or you still have that sort of classic and traditional IT where you protect in the perimeter, but as you move into the cloud world, how are you ensuring that those applications are also protected and the experience that they have when they're trying to authenticate and get access to data in those cloud services that aren't in your data center anymore are more secure and safer. So I guess that's where we have a little bit of tension between users and what they want to do every day and how they want to be flexible and creative and collaborative. And then we have IT who are obviously, trying to make sure that environment's more secure and safer. So I think, as just on that point a little bit, I don't know if there's any questions before we move on any further, but I think maybe Andy, while you're on the call with me here, I guess you obviously are out there with a lot of customers. Do you see this sort of tension between what the users want to be collaborative, and then as they trying to get this experience, and maybe IT are blocking a lot of those services to be able to collaborate in those cloud services like OneDrive for Business or Google Drive and those kinds of places, and IT trying to lock those down, keep them safe and secure, and making sure everything's on-prem. Are you seeing that tension when you're out there seeing customers today?
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate that traditional IT now is coming to an end, and that we now need to consider new ways of managing our infrastructures. It is a little unfortunate, as I speak as one of the dinosaurs that exists out in the world, wanting to use things and protect our environment as we always used to. But now it's all around protecting the identity of a user, making sure they are who they are, and allowing them access only to the data that they're allowed. And the distribution of that data is then controlled quite carefully, so that non-users are unable to access that data, and it is encrypted wherever it happens to lay. Yes, that does mean tearing up the rule book slightly when it comes to what we traditionally may have done, but we are moving towards something that's actually a lot more simple for the IT general IT teams to do. The way I like to characterize it when I'm talking to those IT environments is that it is simplicity in three forms: simplicity of authentication, of distribution, and administration. That's the authentication onto the platforms, allowing your users to be simply identified And that can be a multitude of conditional access and multi-factor policies that effectively your users are unaware of happening. But from a compliance and governance perspective, you are making sure that you are 100% certain what that user is and who they are and where they are when they're trying to access that. The distribution of applications out to end users, the distribution of devices from an administration point of view, how to get devices out to an end user, how to get them actually utilizing the services you need them to utilize to become more productive. And then the whole simplicity around administration of the entire platform, how to utilize those tools that are being provided as part of the M365 toolkit. Things like Autopilot, Azure AD Join, Intune management, Windows Update for Business, delivery optimization, Windows Hello for Business, Windows Defender ATP, and modern app delivery. Those are the sort of capabilities that are blended into the modern desktop environment, allowing your users to actually be fully productive, and thus the tension between IT and the standard user base doesn't evaporate. It's never going to, but it will be a much more conducive to productivity of the company. You'll see IT becoming an enhancer of a business rather than holding it back and just being a drain on the corporate coffers.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Thanks, Andy. And I guess, as you mentioned, it's not always the case that if you give a little bit of that flexibility and start using these cloud apps, that and in a lot of cases that could make sure you might be more secure in moving to these cloud services. But like you say, I think the challenge and the tension that we're seeing is IT today, they're used to sort of managing PC images on-prem, pushing those out to end users, and it's just about, I think part of the session we also want to get that visibility out there around what are the new sort of modern tools available, like things like you mentioned, Windows Autopilot, Windows Hello, and everybody's talking these days about moving to a passwordless environment, and I guess passwords are one of those things that we probably won't get rid of anytime soon, but I certainly would love to be in that world, and it's definitely there. I use passwordless authentication into my personal account these days, so having an app to authenticate is really great, instead of me having to try and remember to use my password and change that every now and then. So that two-factor authentication is really, it does help with Windows Hello and 2FA.
Yeah. It is a great thing now that the government organisations have come on board. So if any of you guys out there have been looking at the Cyber Essentials, you'll find that one of the strange things written in there is the requirement not to change people's passwords anymore, and to move more onto a single password for good, but making it a passphrase, and adding in those extra layers of multi-factor authentication and conditional access policies to make it a bit more seamless for those end users to be able to access. So no longer do they have to write their passwords on sticky notes and put them on their screen or in their drawers, but it's, let's face it, a compliance nightmare.
Yeah, and it is a good way to remember your passwords, but probably not the safest place to write them down on a sticky note next to your PC.
Along with your username, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, thanks. And I think so we'll kind of move more into, I guess, now that productivity experience a little bit more. And I think it's a good place to maybe take another quick poll, just to see where you are today from an office perspective. I think we have one of those ready to go. Cassie, sorry. Yeah, which office suite are you currently using?
We do need some sort of elevator music in at this point while we wait for people to actually answer. I'm not suggesting you sing, Bruce, don't worry.
Thanks. I was about to.
Okay, guys, can we also get the chats going as well? We've had a couple of questions come in, but it would be nice to have some more interaction from you guys out there. Oh, that's a surprise. Nobody's using 2010. Is that true? I imagine most people can find in a corner of their office someone using 2010. I know we have. And it was in the IT team, which was a real shock.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's certainly benefits. I see there's lots of 2013 and 2016, and I guess those are, still the perpetual world, and that may be that, you might be sweating your assets with your perpetual license still. You might be looking at cloud, but have an E1, and, at a later stage, you might want to go ProPlus. There's certainly advantages, though, of aligning your modern desktop with Windows 10 and Office 365 ProPlus. Not so long ago, Microsoft kind of have that release cadence now in sync. So if you're on a semi-annual sort of update cadence on Windows and Office 365, you'll have that sort of update experience kind of in sync now between Office and Windows 10. So having that sort of always up-to-date evergreen experience will only kind of really work if you're using Office 365 ProPlus as well as Windows 10 subscription. It's not to say that obviously we know customers have 2013 and 2016, and a lot of you today have that, but when you sort of start looking at leveraging some of the 365 elements that, especially if you have Office 365 Pro Plus and you just haven't gotten around to uninstalling 2013 or 2016 to deploy the latest version of Office 365 Pro Plus, and perhaps you might want to start looking into doing that. We can certainly help you out, and maybe have some workshops around helping you get there. But I guess that's obviously the journey that we hope most people want to get to, is to make sure you're on a subscription version for both the operating system as well as the productivity tools as well. And we can't obviously talk about everything that you can do with the modern desktop, supported by the services in Microsoft 365, but we would certainly love to come in and have a more in-depth discussion with you if you want to do that at a later stage. So I think we'll kind of put down some details towards the end of this to see who wants to go into any of this in a little bit more detail. It's definitely good to see that nobody is on Office 2010.
Sorry to interrupt. There is actually one person who has said that they are on 2010, but they did select it, but for some reason it didn't come through. So well, apologies for that, Lynn. But we do have a 2010. We do have a 2010.
We have a 2010 user. Woo!
Okay, great. Yeah, we have a 2010. You've got some time to move off, but I think this sort of, when we talk about modern desktop, although we have some users on 2010 and 2013 and 2016, it's really about switching from that perpetual life cycle of Office and moving to that modern desktop. And it's just important, I guess, to stay current. So we'll talk a little bit about why it's important to stay current. But before we get into the details around that, obviously, what it means to move to a modern desktop, I guess that best experience for end users and IT is to be, the most productive, the most secure, and have the lowest TCO. So the ease of use to deploying and getting those latest versions and features out there onto those desktops. I think gone are the days now where, Microsoft released a new product every 3 years, and then, as a customer, you had to think about and plan these huge projects to now go and install the newer versions of Office, or you might be one of those customers who like to be 1 or 2 versions behind. But there's always this big sort of push then at some stage during that life cycle to get onto the newer versions, whether it's something like end of support that's pushing you there, or there may be other reasons why you might want to move on to the newer versions of Office. Maybe there's a couple of features in there that you want to get, and you can only get those with the latest versions. But there's always challenges. There's I guess apps in the Office suites, maybe macros and BB apps and those kinds of things that were developed in the older versions, and you're not too sure whether or not you'd be able to get them working in the new versions of Office. And I guess the same is true for Windows 10. So you might have apps that were developed a long time ago and you've sort of been upgrading those through the path, and you're not too sure whether or not those are going to work when you go to the latest versions of Windows and Office together. I guess this is probably another good time to ask my good colleague Andy if he's sort of seen that out there. I mean, what is your experience if users today on Windows 7 or Office 2010 2010 or 2013 want to move to the latest versions. Are you seeing a lot of challenges to get them, to that newer version with applications in Windows and in Office? Is it fairly simple to get there, or is there anything they can use to kind of understand the environment a little bit better before they jump into this new modern desktop approach?
Yeah, you have to split them up into two different environments at that point. You have to look at Windows being one, but Office being a whole nest of vipers, which most organizations need to deal with. When we start talking about Office, you're talking about a lot of add-ins that most organizations have and have accrued over a number of years. Yeah, those sort of environments that you have to deal with when they are COM-based add-ins into your Office 365, your Office environment, means that you need to manipulate those add-ins to work inside the new versions of Office. Microsoft have now invested quite a bit of time and effort into helping organizations move those add-ins and the vendors that provide those add-ins onto the new platform to become that evergreen environment. Without that evergreen environment, obviously, it becomes more problematic to keep up to date. And as you were saying previously, Bruce, that the consistency would appear again of having those builds every 1 or 2 years, the gold builds as we used to call them. Love them things. But you don't necessarily have to do those anymore. We're talking about a constant flow of updates coming out to these applications. So being able to keep up to date with them is becoming more and more time consuming. So although the latest versions of the Office products, the 2019 version, which is only now available for iClick to run, is still supporting the COM add-in, we're not expecting that to happen much further. And Microsoft are also providing teams through the Fast Track program to assist customers that have their own in-house built add-ins to get them forward, to be able to convert them into web add-ins. So they're effectively XML based, and will slot into any of the modern versions of Office going forward. So that's one piece, the Office side of things, and it tends to be a lot more complicated because a lot of users are involved in using those productivity tools. Now, when we move back and start looking at Windows and start playing around with the Windows environment and the applications that are designed to work on there, when we say the applications are working on a Windows 7 platform or maybe even an 8 platform at the moment, those could be applications that have been we don't want to use the term lazily upgraded, but they have been upgraded by a process from even the Windows 3.1 for Workgroups environment. We've seen some of those out there in the last 6 months or so, but they have been moved over and upgraded as they've gone along, rather than taking the advantages of the new bases for building those line of business applications. So we're looking for excuse me, those line of business applications to be redeveloped by those vendors. Now, if you're in the unfortunate situation that happens to be one of your internal applications, Microsoft are also lending support to get those applications upgraded. So there will be developmental support available to you via the Fast Track program, which you can contact your account manager at Bytes to help you along those lines. And they will actually aid you to introduce you to the right development teams and see whether Microsoft can help you along, because there could be some quick wins that Microsoft have seen before to aid you, get you on that track to get into a modern app environment to be able to deploy them correctly. Other vendors, Microsoft may already be having talks with them about getting their products available into the latest versions, which will work seamlessly on a Windows 10 evergreen platform, or alternatively switching over to a SaaS-based solution for some of those applications. So taking that as a cloud-based service via a web browser or other small app interface. So those sort of things are helpful tools that are sitting there ready to be utilized inside the Fast Track environment to help you get moving on to the new environments to utilize.
Great, thanks, Andy. Yeah, so certainly lots of, I guess, tools and support from Microsoft, and I guess we're also around to have these conversations with our customers as well. So if you want to sort of go a little bit deeper into any of those tools, or the things that Andy just spoke about, we can certainly schedule some time at a later date. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Yes. If not, we can continue. Anyone? No? Cool. But if something pops up, we'll keep an eye on the questions. So if you're busy frantically typing away, don't worry, we'll catch those questions as we go through the presentation. So I think let's then touch on what else besides the fact that end of life for the Office suite, and you might be on Office 2010 or 2013 or 2016. There's certainly other advantages to moving to Office 365 ProPlus for your Office experience and your end users' Office experience. And I guess as part of that experience, I think besides the evergreen piece that you're going to get, and the manageability from an IT perspective, to be able to keep that version up to date and not have to worry about going through that next cycle of upgrades. There's a lot of end user sort of features and experiences that your end users are going to love to get if you move them to the latest version of Office 365 ProPlus. So I guess that's where we talk about it being that most productive experience as well. So let's move on. I guess a couple of interesting statistics. 80% of millennials say workplace technology influences decisions to join a company. This is an interesting one. It was certainly a question that came up when my latest interview I had, and to be honest, I only just joined not so long ago. But I was obviously, looking to move to a new company and used to having the newest tools, the newest capabilities, leveraging cloud apps like OneDrive for Business. And I was just thinking, if you're starting a new company and you have to try and relearn how to work on some of the older experiences, like going back to Windows 7 or Office 2010, I don't know if I'd be able to or would want to sort of go down that route. So it was definitely a question that came up, and that was something that not too long ago. I've only been working here a little while, so fortunately enough, but have adopted this technology, and we're on the latest version of Windows and Office. So that was at least something good, and it was a positive piece that came out of one of my interviews with as I was going through the experience. So it's certainly something that was on my mind, and I don't know in your organizations if you're one of those hiring people, and if it's come up in your day to day or when you interviewing potential candidates, but it's definitely something I think, especially as more millennials go into the workplace, they're used to that more modern approach and want to have cloud apps, and their way of working is, I guess, changing, and it's a different culture to what you may be used to previously. So just something to think about, I guess. 42% of the world would change employees if not provided that technology. I'm not sure about that. I guess it depends how much they're paying you as well, but it might influence your decision. 6% average amount of time spent each day by users searching for information. So I guess if you start leveraging some of the new capabilities like OneDrive for Business and Windows 10, and I don't know if you've heard of Files on Demand with Windows 10 and OneDrive for Business, but it really is an awesome way to, if you're sort of uploading all your content into OneDrive and you might be switching to different devices, there's something called Timeline in Windows 10 as well. So some really good features. If I go to the search experience in Windows 10, and it might be the first time I've logged into this PC, but and I've logged in with my Microsoft account, and that's all good as well. It'll search through content that's saved in my OneDrive for Business, although it might not be downloaded or locally available on the Windows 10 PC. I have that unified search experience now. So with Windows 10 and the latest version of Office, I can go into search, find content, it'll search OneDrive, it'll search SharePoint Online, and it'll search my local drive for content that I might be looking for. So it's just that more sort of cohesive experience from an end user perspective. I just go to search and I look for content now. I don't have to go into maybe looking at network share or go to F drive or the M drive, or look on my documents folder. I just go to search, and at least I can find the content that I'm looking for, and it definitely speeds up my experience when I'm searching for information. I don't know what your experience has been, Andy, in looking for new content and leveraging the modern desktop.
Yeah, and it's moving on from millennials as well to the latest level. I can't remember what they're calling them now. Calling themselves something weird.
Yeah, there's a name for them.
Yeah, there is a name for them. I did have it somewhere. But yeah, the new stage of people hitting the workforce now are much more into that persistent chat. They're into all of the collaboration tools that are now being made available by those cloud-based services. And unfortunately, it's not the traditional way of doing things. There has been swings and roundabouts about how people have actually got access to certain technology types. So face-to-face meetings has done a complete about turn. So the millennials and the baby boomers are in tune again. Because face-to-face meetings are back, but with the advent of things like video conferencing coming in there to aid those capabilities. But the want and the ask from a lot of organizations now is that they have that data on demand, wherever they are, being able to pick up any device and being able to have that seamless experience of authentication, of utilizing and access to their data sources. So from most organizations that we go in and talk to, there is specific demographics that they need to adhere to inside those organizations. It's a case of, okay, you may have one job persona, but then two different age groups utilizing that or have different requirements about the type of data and the way that they're accessing it. Whilst you may have a young, anyone from 18-year-old or fresh out of university, 21, coming in and utilizing that sort of data straight away, they'll pick up the mobile phone and they want to consume it on their wonderful Excel versions of their iPhones or on tablets, and they'll want to be accessing it on the move, on the go, consistently connected. With the advent of 5G, it's going to become more simplistic for organizations to have that data readily available in larger quantities rather than having to pull data down and bring it online. The advent of Wi-Fi on planes. So you no longer have to pull down those data onto the device and work on it on a plane now. You can be online. Most train services, admittedly, it is not particularly great yet, but most train services having Wi-Fi and the ability to have those collaborative working practices in that environment whilst on the move. Obviously, we don't advocate doing it whilst driving, but the capability to utilize that while you're being driven somewhere is making much more use out of an individual's time. Where you had dead spots, they can now be productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the modern tools and modern experiences that you can get on a newer device. So I mean, you mentioned about the face-to-face meeting. I was just I think it was last week. There was a couple of new announcements around Microsoft Teams turning 2 years old, and being able to, some pretty cool features there. I don't know if anyone on the call had a look at that recent blog. I think they won an award at Enterprise Connect, and they've just recently launched some new features, or it's on the roadmap. But when you're in a virtual meeting and you're having a video conferencing going on in the background, you can blur whatever's behind you, which is really cool. So you might be at home, but you can blur out the background, even put in a picture behind that. So you might be at home, but you could have a picture of your office behind you, so it looks like you're actually in the office while you're working. So they're doing some really great things. And I think if you're using something like a Surface with a pen or digital ink, to even be able to interact as if you're in the meeting. So there's new whiteboard apps available for Microsoft Teams as well. It was coming in there as part of, I think, where they the Microsoft Surface had that whiteboard app, and now they made it available across the other Windows 10 devices to be able to throw up a whiteboard and sort of in real time, whether you're in the room or not, be able to see when you're whiteboarding something on the whiteboarding app in Teams, for example. example, using a Surface Pen. So gone are the days when you have to be in the room to actually participate in that meeting. And they're also doing things in Microsoft Teams that allows you to if there is somebody in the room and they're whiteboarding on a physical whiteboard, to overlay that through Teams so that you can kind of get that experience even if you're not in the room. So have a look at that. You can just search on the net, I guess, to find Microsoft Turns 2, but there's some really good features coming to Microsoft Teams. And some of those experience would obviously, with the latest versions of Windows 10 and Office, really lend to that experience, using touch and ink and those kinds of things as well, as part of being the most productive desktop out there. So we have a lot of slides, and I think we're going to share the content with everybody. So I'm not going to go through each feature one by one. I'll have a look at some of the slides and maybe call out something that I really think is valuable, and something that certainly, as I've been using, the latest versions, has really helped me along the way. And might be something that you weren't aware of. So we'll go through and just maybe pick out one or two things. Certainly, focused inbox for me. I don't know if anybody have used it. I think it first came out on Outlook on the mobile apps. So obviously now available across desktop, mobile, tablets, or wherever you have the Outlook client. It's certainly something that's helped me on a day-to-day basis sort of have focus in email context. And it really quickly learns what's important to you from a mail perspective. So obviously, emails that you may get from potentially your manager or people that are in your team will obviously always go into your inbox, to your focused inbox, and then maybe announcements to your company will go into other. So it's really easy to train as well. You can right click on an email and say move to other, and then those sort of emails from then on will go to other. But then when you get into the office perhaps in the morning, you don't have a million emails to go through, and a lot of that potentially could be content that you're not interested in. So it sort of learns. And I guess as you move to this modern desktop, one of the key pieces that you get with the 365 ProPlus versions that you're not getting in those perpetual versions is this sort of AI and machine learning experience that's infused into the Office suite. So
yeah. I mean, the capability that comes with the research piece that you guys can see on screen at the moment is that actually can be pulling from internal data sources. It doesn't have to be just pulled, as this one is, basically pulling from various sources that are available online, but it can also be pulling from those data sources that you may have internally. So if you're dealing with stats-based work and that side of things, it could be pulling from white papers that you've written internally, or data scientists have written that side of things. So that could be very simple for you to check that data in. Can also branch out into other services that are available in 365 like Delve, and utilize that machine learning capability that has grouped together all of that content that is actually relational to what you're doing at the moment. In this case, Amazon rainforest. I have no idea how that works here. But you could be writing on that, and all the data relating to it will be pulled back into your environment, in your visible sphere, whereas previously you never would have known that was happening inside your organization. It could be marketing doing something odd, which they do. That was said for Cassie's effect, by the way, guys. So it could be different parts of the organization that could be working on different verticals that could have data relating to that particular subject matter that will be able to be pulled into your productive workload to make it simpler for you, and to give you a completed whole round experience of creating that content.
And another one that for me is, I can't remember which build of Windows this came out in, but it was not too long ago, is Windows Timeline. So I don't know if you're like me and you might have more than one device. You've got a PC or laptop that's an office one, and then you might have your own device. Like I've got my own device that I use as well at home, a Surface Pro that's nice and mobile and smaller for me to sort of use perhaps when I'm sitting on the couch, for example, and I just want to pull up a document. But Windows Timeline really helps you continue from where you left off. So, if you see, I don't know if I can get the mouse to hover over next to the search bar on the Windows taskbar, you'll see this little icon over there, and I don't know if you're on or which build it came out in. Andy, can you recall? I think Creators or the fall updates or one of the updates, they introduced timeline, and you could be working on content at the office on a Word document, for example, like the one you see on your screen. I shut that down and I open my my Surface at home, and I can hit the Windows timeline and click on that Word document, and it'll just open up, and I can continue from where I left off. So they really are putting some really good tools into, and that's, I think, a great example of where Windows plus the Office, the latest versions of Office, kind of help you, be able to pick up from wherever you are on any device and carry on working. Certainly features that you'll only get in the, Windows 10 sort of Office subscription environment.
Incidentally, I have found out what they call the new generation. It's Generation Z, apparently.
Z.
Anyone born from 1998 onwards,
Yeah.
you're apparently Generation Z.
Cool. So mobility and access from anywhere. So I don't know if anyone's tried this out or used it, but being able to use, there's a new phone app that you can use and install on your mobile phone, whether it's Android or iOS. And then on your Windows 10 device as well, there's a phone companion or phone app that you kind of pair your mobile device with the operating system. And that gives you access to be able to send and receive text messages from your Windows device. So I guess if you might have used WhatsApp, for example, and similar experience where you can have WhatsApp on your PC and be able to send and receive WhatsApps from there. But this is obviously taking that experience from a text message perspective, and I can open up the phone companion app on Windows 10, send an SMS, and it'll come from my phone. I can read them and reply to the SMSs. It'll pop up and let me know I've got a new SMS. So being able to pair your phone with Windows 10 to be able to send and receive text messages, as well as maybe you've taken a couple of photographs that you want to get access to really quickly. That phone app that you get on Windows 10, you can open up, it'll show you the latest pictures you may have taken on your mobile phone, and it wirelessly transfers them across. So it's a really seamless experience. It's always been a bit of a challenge to try and get those pictures, and you're trying to find cables, or you're trying to upload them into OneDrive for Business or OneDrive or wherever it is you save your pictures these days. This way, it kind of seamlessly just talks to your mobile phone and wirelessly transfers them across, so you can double click on it and open up a picture that you've taken recently from your PC. So that's, if you haven't seen those apps, check them out as well. Really nice to, and I think they're going to be bringing in a lot more features into that phone app as well. So they showed some really good things recently, I think, at the Build conference, where they're going to be doing like mirroring of your phone onto the PC as well, and some app experiences inside there. So I think there'll be a lot of innovation happening in that space as well. So look out for that coming down the line. Actionable insights from data analytics. So this is really a really cool piece of information as well. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you're in Office 365 ProPlus, the latest versions of Excel, I could type in, maybe put in a country like France or England. It'll kind of understand that it's a country data point, and then I'll be able to pull in things like population, maybe what is the, other data that kind of maybe GDP, all those other kinds of things that go along with it. So without me having to tell it what sort of data points I'm looking for, it just understands that I'm putting a country there, and then I can actually pull in other data sources around that. So those data types are coming in. There's one for stocks as well. So if you like to keep ahead of the stocks, you could put in like Microsoft stocks, Alphabet, or all those, and it'll pull in the detail, who's the CEO, what the share price is, what's the movement over the last week, for example. Without you having to go and find those sort of data points online, you can just type in the name of the stock, and it'll understand what you're trying to do, and you can create a table out of that, throw up some nice charts, and get going really quickly. So I don't know if any of you guys have tried that out yet, but it's pretty cool to play around with.
No, we do regularly demonstrate to customers the wonders of the Power Apps within inside the Excel world. Certainly is utilization with heat maps, that side of things. We find most organisations, if they do sell just primarily inside the UK, have that sort of data come from their customers, from their users. So it could be pulling any form of data in from their internal sources and putting it in there and heat mapping it over the UK, so you can see the density with where your customers are based or where they happen to be buying from. We did a very simple 5-minute demonstration with a customer that sold their products utilizing various numbers of online stores, one of them being Amazon. So with inside that Amazon marketplace, we pulled back all the data of where the customers were based, and we were able to plot a heat map of the UK of where the largest concentrations were of where they were selling things, so they could actually change their marketing strategies to be able to target those other areas. And it was very strange. It tended to be, for that particular customer, they sold more in rural areas than they actually did in big cities, which was odd because the type of products, I can't say what they are, the type of products you would assume they'd be more up and coming type people inside the cities, but no, actually it was selling more in rural areas. So that's enabling them to now go and have a look at their marketing strategy and pointing it towards that side of things. We demonstrate how to just take that data, take any other online sources, pull those in, and to round out maybe a demonstration of how things are looking in the marketplace around specific things. So those capabilities to pull in the bits of data and actually better put them forward to other people, to your viewers effectively, is amazing nowadays. And plus taking things from here to Power BI and the utilization of the Power BI solution to give them an interactive capability to view that data going forward. It can be amazing.
Yeah, and I think there's this sort of concept that's now coming across. It's sort of originated in PowerPoint, but it's get ideas or ideas. So you'll see it started in PowerPoint, it's coming to Excel as well, but you might have a set of data and you're not too sure how to sort of represent or correlate that data in something that's meaningful. So you could, highlight that content and just say, get ideas, and it'll kind of come back with some recommendations. So this is, sort of leveraging that AI capability built into the service in the background, and it's bringing it forward to you in the likes of something like Excel or PowerPoint. And I think we have some examples potentially in PowerPoint. There you see on the second line there, the PowerPoint content creation tools is probably my most favorite feature that's in the Office suite. So I don't know if any of you have played around with PowerPoint design ideas. So if you not one of those people who are really good at putting some fancy slides together, you put in a couple of bullet points and it's on a white background and maybe you throw in a picture and that's your presentation, which certainly used to be the case for me. Design ideas will actually have a look at what you've put on that slide and then make it look really amazing. So you just throw in a picture, you put in a few points, and then it'll come up without even having to do anything. Down the right-hand side, it'll make a few suggestions for you. So
yeah,
really awesome experience. If you haven't checked that out.
It has saved my bacon on more than one occasion. Speaking as a techie, I have zero artistic ability.
Yeah, so it's certainly something, and I suppose, in the techie world where we're not too creative in terms of putting those sort of things together, it helps a lot. It even does things like understands what the content is in your slide. So I might have an agenda, for example, with times. So 10 to 11, Andy's going to be doing this presentation. 11 to 12, it's me. It'll then put that in a timeline format. With some cool graphics and pictures in the background, or I might have some actions and it'll put, like I need to email this person. Next step is to send out the invite, for example, and it'll put little, like an email envelope icon next to the first bullet points. And so it really looks at the content as well, and it makes meaningful sort of suggestions on how to make your slide look a lot better. So definitely something if you haven't had a chance to look at design ideas. And if you can't find these features in the latest versions of Office, there's just a bar on the top that says search, and if you say search design ideas and you click on it, it'll take you right there, and it'll be able to start helping you put together really cool PowerPoint slides. So I mean, I think we touched a little bit on the interaction, with the different inputs like voice, touch, and ink. Using ink, digital ink, for example, with a Surface Pen, not just in PowerPoint, but across the stack, I guess, in Word as well. If you want to annotate and mark up a Word document, so if I have my pen and I sort of scribble over a paragraph, for example, it'll delete that out of my Word document, or I want to add in a word, I can put in a little like sort of bracket thing, and then I can input that word in. So using digital ink, for example, across the sort of Office 365 ProPlus stack of products, you can interact with pretty much any input method you like. You can use dictation if you don't like to type out anything. Open up an email and start dictating into it, and it'll copy all that into text into your email, for example. So there's certainly different ways you can use this. And also, there's something called learning tools. I don't know if anyone's seen learning tools or heard of them, but ways to view content, I guess, in a better way. So if you have challenges, or you want to have a more accessible sort of environment for your users, learning tools is a great way to do that. So for accessibility in Windows and Office, there is something called learning tools. You can have a look at that as well. But makes life a lot easier if you're trying to have a better experience or an easy experience trying to read some content, for example. Contextual collaboration and sharing. I guess we've spoken a lot about how much easier it is to collaborate and communicate with each other in the cloud. So having that ability to co-author content in real time, leveraging Office 365, OneDrive for Business, and the latest versions of Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. But you use things like add mentions as well. So I could be in an email, for example. I might be talking about somebody and I add mention that person, but sometimes you might forget to add into the email. If I add mention Andy, for example, he'll get put into the to field in email, and then also when he receives that email, it'll actually he can see straight away that he's been mentioned. Like, so I've called him out specifically in an email, and Andy will be like, oh, Bruce has mentioned me in this email, I better read it quickly.
All straight to the trash. Yeah.
We probably have like right click, move to other, and he won't ever look at it again. But so I ever use add mentions. It is really great, but it's also coming through the rest of the portfolio as well. So although it started out in Outlook, to be able to use add mentions in Word documents, for example, if you want to, you've got some tasks that you want specific people to complete, I can add mention Andy, he's going to do this piece, and then it'll also notify him that he's got a task assigned to this Word document. So there's some really good features coming through. One of the, I guess, biggest reasons for using cloud sharing technology or cloud storage is version history. So if you're co-authoring or working in real time, somebody makes changes that you don't like, for example, or you might be hit with a ransomware attack, for example, and all your documents get encrypted and corrupted. Using OneDrive for Business, I can go back to the latest version before that happened. There's even a little slider that I can go into to say I need to take all my content back to 2 days ago or 3 days ago or a week ago, and it'll restore all my content back to that specific state. So leveraging all those new features in the collaboration and sharing world is also really good. Any questions? I think before we, now that we finish the productivity piece, we're just going to move into the secure piece. We have spoken a bit about how important it is to make sure that as you leverage and move into this cloud world with modern desktop, that you are, and make sure that you have a secure environment as well. But before we do move on, do we have any questions?
No questions at the moment. If anybody does have anything, or if there's anything that you would like us to cover or speak in more detail about as we're going through it, please do say, and we can kind of tailor it to your needs. Really want you to get the most out of this session. We do appreciate that everyone's time is very valuable. So, yeah.
Okay. So I think, Andy, and we, obviously touched on a lot of this in the beginning around, traditional security versus the modern security approach. And I guess, if you look at the bottom of your screen, this is really why, we feel that it is important to consider as you start moving into the cloud, to change the way you think about security as well. So, some interesting statistics there: 5 billion unique threats per month. It's obviously a huge amount of threats. And if you're not familiar with Office 365 and Windows and the EMS piece, so the Microsoft 365 stack, there is a piece to that called Enterprise Mobility and Security, and that kind of sort of hooks onto something that's called the Microsoft Security Graph. And what that really is this huge sort of pool of intelligence that Microsoft gather through all these signals that it gets on a day-to-day basis, through the billions of authentications they get with the likes of Azure AD, Xbox, Outlook.com. So they really can start understanding and finding patterns between how people are logging in from which devices, and then leverage that and make it available to their customers to be able to make sure that they can protect themselves in a better way. So being able to leverage that intelligence when you're protecting your environment on premise or in the cloud, moving forward. So to understand when potentially you get these threats coming through, whether it be through anomalous sort of activities or just sort of using it for information protection and other capabilities. So obviously a lot happening in that front, and I think we're all pretty much aware of the dangers out there in cybersecurity. But let's just have a look at why are we talking about the modern desktop being the most secure environment, and just quickly touch on one or two of those sort of features that you get when moving to the modern desktop with Windows 10, and what you get in that sort of out-the-box experience. And I don't know, Andy, if you've also obviously Windows 10, and maybe you've seen us out there while you've seen customers in the techie world, but a lot of customers probably don't know or may not know that Microsoft is pouring in billions of dollars into security, and Windows 10 obviously comes built in with Windows Defender. And if you look at what they're doing from an advanced threat protection as well across Windows and Office and all those places, I guess they are really putting in a lot of money to ensure that they have that great out-the-box experience and leverage the intelligence behind that to ensure that they can block and prevent these sort of threats from getting onto the endpoint. So having that sort of EDR sort of capability built into the experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft are, as you said, plowing an awful lot of money into the security, the compliance, the governance of all their suite of applications, whether it's an operating system right the way through to the actual Office apps, back-end systems, Exchange, SharePoint, the capabilities to not only provide that secure environment, but also track and trace users' use of that environment, which gives you good statistical views on what's actually happening, what's being utilized inside your environment. So you can actually tell whether people are using email or not, or what they're using it for, and how they're using it from a statistical modeling point of view. But it's the proactive capabilities that are now built into the Windows stack. So with the threat protection capabilities, the ability that if something happens to a specific user account within a specific machine, it's a case of that being detected early on, and that detection then being transmitted globally. So every Windows device that is connected to the threat protection matrix globally is then protected against that particular type of attack, so that pattern matching against these things is very, very simple to do. The risk profiles that are built up around user interaction with your systems, what those users are doing on a day-to-day basis, are they doing things inside a compliant way of doing it, or is there maybe something a bit odd about what they're up to? Is that communication that's coming in containing links, containing other documents? Does it contain malware? Is that link going to a proper bona fide site, or is it actually going to somewhere else? ATP stepping in and making sure that those data sources actually match to what they should be. But it's a whole suite of applications that Microsoft are watching. Yes, there are a number of vendors out there that are security specialists, but what Microsoft is providing you with is that good base capability within inside its M365 stack to make sure that you've got something there to do it. There will be niche products that will aid you and augment the M365 capabilities, but Microsoft is providing you with those base capabilities straight out the box. No need to go to another supplier. You have the vanilla ready to roll, making your organization as compliant as possible quickly. There will be some learning involved in how to set up those environments, but the great thing is about what Microsoft are trying to do with its simplicity push is that those changes that you need to make, those augmentations you need to make to the environments to make them fit your working practices are simple to do, and they're well documented. And Microsoft have provided or help out with a vast partner network like from ourselves and other partners to aid you to be able to get these things installed or educate you about how to do it yourselves quite simply. So the capabilities built into the threat protection matrix that's available within inside the Microsoft world is astonishing now. When more and more organizations that we come in touch with at the moment are now seriously considering a full Microsoft stack. And these are organizations that traditionally have hated Microsoft because of the big blue as they were. But now because of the way they are listening to consumers and they are changing the way that they're working. And incidentally, well, we haven't mentioned it yet. I don't think we have. There is forums available for you to change Microsoft's roadmap. The user voice forums. Every product within inside the Microsoft stack has a user voice forum. It's literally user voice, one word. You type in user voice and the product into a search engine of your choice. You can then think, obviously. Google, as everyone does. You will find one of the user voice forums on Teams, on Windows, on whatever it happens to be, and you can then interact basically with the Microsoft backend teams, the engineering teams that do monitor this on more of an hourly basis than a daily basis now, to make sure they capture anything that's new that could be beneficial to them, and they're adding it to their roadmap. They're changing their roadmaps dynamically to fit customer requirements.
I mean, it's almost like the Windows Insider program, the user voice kind of piece was born out of that sort of experience that they put together for Windows Insiders. So I mean, they were really successful in listening to the end users and how they wanted to shape the latest version of Windows with Windows Insider, and now having user voice. So if you want to provide input for any of these other features in potentially that productivity world.
I don't know whether you've done it, Bruce, so far, but I've actually put forward several ideas. Not saying I'm on it all the time, but I have put forward several ideas. 3 of those ideas have actually been incorporated into builds. Now, whether they've been already on the roadmap, which I presume they have, I'm not saying I'm going to come up with anything brilliant. But that fact that those capabilities within inside the engineering teams take, let alone my idea about a nuance within inside their application stack that maybe could be improved for all customers, has been taken on board and acted upon. It did go a bit quiet on all 3 of them for quite a while, and then suddenly reading the blogs, hey, I suggested that, and then notification on my particular thing in user voice saying we sorted it.
And I think what's great with that is obviously they prioritize based on the feedback they get from everybody else. So I mean, you may have pick up a nuance or something that you'd like to have as a feature, but you might be the only person. I mean, you might do something in a really specific way, and 90% of the rest of the users wouldn't care less whether that feature gets added or not. So I guess it's based on popularity and how many other users out there would like that feature as well. And then certainly they're prioritized to make sure that's one of the features that has been added. I think a really great example of user voice in Microsoft Teams recently was the ability to have a private channel, for example, in a team. So I know it was talked about a lot. So you create a team in Microsoft Teams, but you want just one of those channels, specific users to access that, and not the whole team. And that's something that we can see now coming out as a feature in Microsoft Teams.
It was certainly talked about an awful lot.
Yeah, and it's great to know that you can have that input to help shape the way these things kind of move forward. So and certainly, I think. It definitely seems like these days you need to have a multi-pronged approach when it comes to security. So having that sort of pre-breach detection piece, and I guess that's in the threat protection world. And then what happens, when they get to that endpoint and what's happening from that perspective. You can't just have, an antivirus tool on your desktop and think that's the end of it. They say a lot, and a lot of people are talking about today is having, assume breach sort of position. So, have that pre-breach sort of way of doing things. If they do get on, are you able to detect and pick up really quickly that somebody has been able to get into your environment, and what actions can you take to make sure that you get them out as soon as possible? So, and I think across those sort of different areas, or that, I guess that attack kill chain, as they call it, to make sure you're protecting on each one of those sort of pillars and making sure that, you have ATP in place for pre-breach as they get on, using things like Azure ATP to pick up the anomalous behavior, so suspicious activity going on in your organization, and then have those suggestions on how you can prevent that from happening further, and making sure they're not getting any data out of your sort of environment. And I guess, as key to that is making sure you're protecting the information itself. And I think there's been a lot of sort of improvements in this area over the couple of months to a year. I think this sort of the information protection piece across Windows, we had Windows information protection, there's Office 365 sensitivity labels, and then we have Azure information protection as well. So I guess in the past, a lot of customers, or certainly ones that I've been speaking to, have been like, okay, well, where am I setting up these policies, and where am I sort of, what am I supposed to use to classify content? And I think with this new sort of Microsoft information protection approach, where they're unifying their labeling across Windows, Office 365, and EMS with Azure information protection, is really helping to make that sort of a much more seamless experience.
Yeah, and the fact that they're incorporating the on-premise data storage, so any CIFs, Samba files, you name it, and including on-premise SharePoint, by the way, I should mention that. So it being incorporated to allow you to not only discover data that's out there, so with the scanning tool, but also then classify and or protect it to whichever layer. Now that's done at a file level rather than traditionally at NTFS permissions, DFS permissions level, so where you control an entire directory. No, you're talking about specifically controlling that individual file. So wherever that file goes, it still maintains its protection. Even if it's out in the wild world somewhere, it's still seeking access back to Azure AD to make sure that it's being correctly utilized or correctly accessed. And that also gives you the ability to retrospectively explode a file in the field. So if you decide that that file should no longer be accessed in the field, you can retrospectively change the permissions on it, and thus making it unreadable in the field.
I don't know if this has happened to some of you, but have you ever sent out an email and then try to hit that record button in Outlook? It doesn't really work, right? So it sounds like at least using this, I can. Yeah. So at least I think with this approach, you can revoke access to the content, whether it was sent out via email or a file share, however it got out there. The point is, that you can revoke access to that content through these tools as well. I think we've spoken about Windows Defender and ATP. We spoke a lot, I guess, around this piece as well, Andy, around using Windows Hello. Do you have to for Windows Hello to work? I mean, do you need to have a Surface, or is there other vendors
No,
out there supporting Windows Hello?
no, it doesn't have to be a Surface. It just has to be compliant technologies. As you can see on screen, there's lots of sign-in opportunities there. Hello does support all of them effectively, so it doesn't matter. It's looking for biometrics or traditional ways of authentication. They could be card-based, it could be anything. But yes, it does. On the surfaces, obviously, Microsoft have made sure that the technology involved in the Surface and with the Surface hubs and those sort of things, that the Hello technology is readily available and can be utilized. And it's great that it's on here as well, the fact that it could be utilizing Credential Guard to make sure that those credentials are no longer stored on the RAM or in the hard drive at any point in time. So pass the hash security breaches are then becoming a bit of a thing of the past. So depending on what sort of biometrics you have, most laptops now are coming with fingerprint scanning or fingerprint technology on them. You have the cameras on most laptops, assuming you haven't covered them. But those sort of things are available to you to make sure that your facial mapping can be your root in, your fingerprint can be your root in, even vocally now. You can actually talk to your computers, and that is now built in. I think that's still in preview, as well as your PIN and anything else to add to that secure way of accessing the environment.
So I guess Windows Hello for Business is not just about being able to look at a PC and unlock for you. It's just different ways of being able to authenticate, with biometrics, whether it's facial recognition. I believe there's these new FIDO2 sticks as well, where you put in a little USB key and you put your finger on that, and it authenticates you to get in as well. So I think there's lots of ways.
So many ways.
But like you say, it mitigates it past the hash sort of where it would be attacker could get onto that system, grab those hashes, and then start moving naturally in the organization.
When they use Credential Guard, definitively.
That's the key part there.
Yeah, and that's available with Win 10 Enterprise.
Cool. Okay, we spoke about this piece. A little bit about MBAM, I guess. So we spoke about information protection, but also there's a BitLocker piece to this as well.
There is, and BitLocker doesn't necessarily mean to be, as most device encryption, too restrictive. It can be reduced down to the operating system layer, if need be, or nevertheless utilized with a similarly simple way of accessing through into the operating system. Now, the great thing is about BitLocker, now it can actually be managed centrally, utilizing Intune, to making it very, very simple for your end users when they do forget what their login credentials are. Let's face it, we've all been there and we've all done it ourselves. But there is a centrally managed way of them gaining back access into their machines as long as they can authenticate.
Okay. So that sort of MBAM experience is now moved into the cloud world. That's cool.
It's now all available inside that cloud world. BitLocker, obviously, in the version of Pro was available, but it was a very manual process. And if you wanted to have a centralized administrator, you had to copy the keys off into your AD environment, local on-prem AD environment. Whereas now with the MBAM capability, it can be used separately. As a separate entity with Windows 10 Enterprise, or alternatively, it could be managed by Intune, giving you that central point of management for your entire environment, making it simple for you. Yet again, it comes down to simplicity of management, simplicity of administration and authentication.
So I think just in we don't have too much time left. Just a couple of tools I think we spoke about during and throughout the session. This is a great slide to kind of position some of those toolkits available. So things like Windows Analytics, the Readiness Toolkit for Office. So just these tools will help you sort of understand your existing environment and then make recommendations or let you know which maybe which pilot set of users you should upgrade first or move to Windows 10. Is that sort of, am I getting the right idea on what Windows Analytics is all about?
Yeah, links for all of these are available through the Fast Track portal. obviously, through our wonderful marketing team here, we can send out those links to those pieces of software tools, basically. Yeah, having access to the insider and the monthly channel is worth keeping up to date with. We, even as industry subject matter experts, we find it quite hard keeping up to date as well. So we have to be on top of this almost daily. But yeah, looking at the readiness toolkits, it's worthwhile if you haven't already made the move up to, so whoever that one person was that is currently utilizing Office 2010, definitely get on the readiness toolkit for Office, making sure that there are going to be no issues with your macros. Maybe these macros were written in, I don't know, what was it? Word Basic was the original one, wasn't it?
Word
Basic.
before my time, Andy.
Yeah, Word Basic, and before it became Visual Basic for applications,
Yeah.
and other add-ins, COM-based add-ins, as we mentioned earlier, that may be problematic for that Office environment. And then the Ready for Windows type. Having a look at those vendor support statements that are in there, talking to Microsoft through the fast track program to make sure that the app versions are actually going to work for you in the new environment that you're moving to. Assistance around creating builds that will work with autopilot, so that you can literally unbox a machine fresh from the manufacturer, hand it to a user. They just log in with their UPNs, their email addresses from their perspective. They log into that device, 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on the application stack. Obviously, that device is secured, compliant, and has the apps either streaming down in the background for it or already installed, ready to roll. So the capability for the moving to the next step on, once you understand what your current estate is telling you, can be very, very simplistic. Now, the image that you've got up on screen here is for the analytics piece. So the Windows 10 analytics to work out what those devices are, whether they're capable of being upgraded from a hardware perspective, and whether they will work in the new world, whether they'll be underpowered, for instance, RAM issues or hard drive space or anything else that could be conflicting with those known environments that Microsoft have already hit. Now, being the fact that we're already quite a considerable period of time into Windows 10 deployment globally, we have got an awful lot of data about those vendor apps that do work and don't work, and that's being fed back into the Windows Analytics platform.
That's a good point, though. It's I guess what if there are customers out there that they have a lot of PCs, laptops that maybe don't meet those power requirements that they need moving forward. Is there anything they can do virtually, for example, move to a virtualized environment?
Yeah, virtualized environment. There are now available. It's currently in preview, soon to come out fully. But you have the Windows virtualized desktop environment in Azure. So you basically are setting up a VDI environment in that Azure, and that could be just a tactical solution for the time being, whilst you're choosing which Surface device to deploy to your staff. That was an obvious plug, sorry guys. But yes, the capability to have that virtualized environment so that they can still utilize those older machines for the short term tactically, but whilst on a secure Windows platform that is already pre-configured, ready for that Windows desktop. Modern desktop environment means that it makes things much simpler. Now, the good thing to talk about as well is Microsoft offer, as well as the virtualized environment, they have effectively a Windows desktop as a service capability, which is Surface devices preloaded and managed by Microsoft from the back end to make sure that they're up to date. So you literally hit the ground running.
Just to manage desktop, you buy the hardware, everything else pre-configured on those devices?
It's a subscription. It's a subscription, and it's to that device and the operating system and the Office linking on. Obviously, it will require an M365 license over the top to include it, but Microsoft makes sure that the Windows side of things, the Microsoft core applications, are kept up to date and managed in that way. So it's a managed desktop environment for you without being virtualized. So those devices that do come up a bit short on the hardware profile maybe that could be a route. We know a lot of customers out there do have a leasing technologies around their devices. Well, this is another route, but provided by Microsoft and its partner network.
And I guess, I mean, it kind of makes a lot of sense if you're moving to that subscription world in terms of licensing to do the hardware piece through that
Why not do it the
subscription.
same?
I think this just slide talks around to, you know, how to get to that latest version of updates and the Windows servicing update channels and all those good things. I guess we kind of touched on how they have semi-annual cadence updates. Windows Update for Business you touched on briefly as well, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just about, you know, how do you get to Windows 10, in-place upgrades, express updates from there on, and if you, you know, want to make sure you keep current, you can either update from internet, I guess, or through existing tools like System Center, or how's that kind of work?
And it's pulling those updates from whatever source makes sense to you, and that could be peer-to-peer with inside your organization as well. So one user actually downloads it and it's distributed locally, which can be a great, or it can be pulled down to a central resource for distribution, not dissimilar to the Windows Update Server model as was available previously. And then the applications themselves, the operating system checks those repositories for its updates. Do they exist? Yes, they're there. It also means from that point of view, you can actually control quite simply how often those updates come out by when you actually change those. And also with inside the individual versions of the operating system and the versions of the Office 365 apps, you can actually manipulate which branch they are actually receiving, whether it's bleeding edge technology that you actually want to, certainly people in IT, for instance, or maybe it's that more core systems that you need to keep making sure they're 100% and may put them on a delayed version that's actually deployed. And you control when those updates hit them, rather than that Patch Tuesday, which is still around and still exists. The Patch Tuesday, everyone else takes down your network by trying to download their updates directly from the cloud all the time. They could be pulling them from the local environment nice and neatly.
Yeah. I guess that's the advantage of having, you know, some users in IT and maybe some other parts of the business on a monthly channel, for example. So you have to be able to pick up something if it's not really working too well or compatible with a specific app. They pick it up early rather than after it's gone to the entire organization.
Yeah, you want to check things early. It's always a good idea.
Yeah, I think this is just we could probably end up on this slide. How are we doing for time, Cassie? It's yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, just the key message that we want to leave you with is why stay current. I guess we've seen, you know, over the years with this perpetual versions of software is that, you know, there's every 3 years, I guess, a new release cycle, a new version of software. And in between, they try and keep up to date with the security patches. But often it takes the next versions to kind of solve a lot of those problems. So you end up with that protection gap that you can see in that picture. So, you know, if you move to a subscription type cycle, there's constantly new features, new security patches, updates, and they're always releasing newer and newer things into the service so that you know, have a more constant protection, I guess, area rather than that big gap. You know, if you have that 3-year cycle of going to the next version. So just something to keep in mind. And, you know, if you're still in that perpetual cycle and upgrading every 3 years, another good reason to move to the subscription is so that you're always on the latest and greatest version and you're always, you know, up to date with security as well.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much all we have time to. I don't know if Cassie, you want to just end off with the
yeah, no, if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the questions box on the right hand side of the screen. Thank you for Bruce and Andy for sharing all those lovely slides and your content and your knowledge today. If you do, well, if you would like our specialists to come in and talk to you in your offices and go into more detail about anything you've heard today or anything else, you know, we can arrange a workshop or a customer immersion experience. You can just reach out to your Bytes account manager. Andy, I don't know if you wanted to just give a sort of high level, you know, what to expect from a sort of half-day workshop if you were to come in to see one of the customers.
Basically, we have no plans for those. It's a brief discussion with you guys, with you, the customer, to make sure that we cover the elements that you want to cover for that particular half day. What you have a need for in the business, we'll drill down into your business requirements during that period of time. We can take you and your staff through the new capabilities of the Office 365 and the M365 suites to make sure that everything is covered to your requirements, rather than a set piece coming out. We've discovered that doesn't work incredibly well with our customer base. It's more better to have a little bit more of a fluid conversation with you. And that makes sure that you actually understand what the technologies are, how they can benefit your business specifically, not just the generic piece of marketing that comes out to Microsoft.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Bruce. So I don't think there's any questions. I think everyone's feeling a little bit tired now this time of the day and getting ready to head off home. So there is a feedback form that will just pop up at the end, and if you could just fill that in, that really does help us, and we'd really appreciate it. Again, just reach out to your Bytes account manager or email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, and someone will be in touch if you do require any further assistance. So thank you both for your time today, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.